10 years after the announcement of the Belt and Road Initiative in China, it seems that China is now dominating how we think about globalization. Europe's answer is a global gateway. Is that the right answer to China's initiative?
To be honest, I would say no. I think to have a real answer, we should define ourselves what globalization means, and not just trying to copy the Belt and Road Initiative and saying we do it on a different way because we are actually coming with a democratic mindset. So I think it would be way more worthwhile to actually think about what do we mean with globalization and how can we make it better. I mean, it's not something new for the European Union to talk about globalization, nothing new for the transatlantic partnership. But I think nobody really knows anymore what we want with it. Why are we doing it? Why we are promoting it actually? And what would be like some points where we can make it better than we have done it for the last couple of decades. So I think this would be way more important to define it ourselves. Think what do we understand with globalization and how do we have to change it? Because I mean, it's not only that Chinese are maybe asking or questioning what actually does globalization mean. It's also that our societies are challenging globalization and the idea of it, because it has produced winners and losers, and these losers are also at home. And so I think we have to define it much more fundamentally, what actually globalization means. And of course, when we look to the global initiative then and compare Belt and Road and Global Gateway, I also think that it might be not necessarily the right answer, because to be honest, have you heard that much about the Global Gateway Initiative as we have talked about the Belt and Road Initiative? So here we already see that the level of ambition is a completely different one. And what I hear is that it's not the idea, what I would say, of a globalization that we talk with each other. So it's not like European partners going to Africa and trying to invest a lot of money, but actually talking with the people there and seeing what are the needs for a global society. And this is not what seems happening right now. So I think there is a lot of room for improvement.
Is it working? I'm not sure that that's an easy question to answer, because we're still yet to see the details of the Global Gateway. The BRI has been around for a while. We've seen the effects of that across the world, not just in African countries. We've seen it also here in Europe. You know, we've seen what that has meant. But Global Gateway, I think, is still in planning, is still in formation. We don't yet know the details. And I think that's what a lot of African stakeholders are waiting for, to know what the details are, to know what it means for them and what the projects under the Global Gateway actually mean for them. They don't have clarity on that yet. My feeling is that they're hoping that the clarity will come as soon as possible.
But are the Europeans too slow? I mean, China is so fast in developing and engaging in Africa and so many other countries. And in Europe, it seems like they're still debating.
Yeah, but I think it's a bit different in the case of the BRI, because from what we understand, it was a bit of a branding exercise. So things were already going on, and then BRI came and became the brand under which they were understood as being Chinese. I think the Global Gateway is a bit different. I think they're trying out things in the sense of, one, having the brand, but also having new projects attached to it. There have been accusations of, repackaging of old projects as Global Gateway projects, which I think is fair, but I also think the Commission in Brussels is taking that to heart and trying to figure out what the new projects under the Global Gateway could look like. So speaking about speed might not be the best way to look at it in this case, given the fact that the BRI came at a certain period in time when projects were already running, and then it became sort of a brand that was attached to the projects running. And the Global Gateway is also something new that's, that's trying to figure out how it would look like.
Could this be an opportunity or a motive for African countries to bring relations with Western blocs to another more on an equal level?
You mean the Global Gateway?
The Global Gateway.
I'm not sure.
And the competition with China?
Well, the competition with China, probably. Yeah. But the Global Gateway, I'm not so sure.
Why?
Because from the way it looks, it's a development project. It's a project designed primarily by Europe, the Commission, mostly from Brussels, as an answer to someone else's agenda, right? And I generally am sort of careful to understand what the agenda you are reacting to is and how well you're actually positioned to react to that agenda. So the Global Gateway is sort of a reaction to, like you said earlier, to the BRI. And it's hard for me to imagine that someone's agenda in reaction to someone else's agenda could then be the thing that makes African countries go on an equal footing with Europe. I mean, I have other thoughts on how we could approach a bit of equality, but I don't think the Global Gateway is the thing that will get us there.
What should be our answer, like, towards Africa or to a lot of other countries of the global south where China is engaging right now?
Yeah, I think the answer should be that we are here too, but we are interested in your interests. It's not just like the US, the European Union and China trying to outcompete each other in Africa, but actually saying we are here not just for our interests. I think this would be the right answer, but of course we should only say that if we mean it.
Are the Chinese doing it differently?
I mean, they're Chinese, so they're doing it differently, definitely.
Also on a more equal level?
I don't know about equality. I mean, it's a difficult word to use. It's different. It's different, and also because the capacities are different from the Chinese side to what Europe can offer. So, for example, China has been building infrastructure a lot in the past 20, 30 years. So the experience of building infrastructure is really new. I mean, they know how to do it because they've been busy doing it in the past 20 years, 30 years in China. Versus other parts of the world where the infrastructure they have, they've developed it long ago, right? So the capacity to actually build infrastructure isn't there as it used to be. So, which means that a whole lot of the way that China can react and react quickly in infrastructure constructing is not going to be the same way as Europe can do it, because Europe hasn't been exercising that muscle, right, for a while. So, I mean, that might also account for the question around, speed.
How welcome are the Chinese in Africa? How well are they being received?
I think they are received generally well.
Despite all the frictions you hear about, especially in European and Western medias?
What are the frictions?
That the Chinese are very aggressive, that they are doing land grabbing, that the people in Africa often don't feel comfortable with so many Chinese doing their business, that they only hire their own employers.
I mean, let's put it this way. I think a whole lot of what I hear about China in Africa, in Europe, so from Europeans, appears to be stuck in a bit of the past. Yes, so many of what you just said about Chinese companies bringing their workers, about certain standards not being followed. That was the case, definitely. When I started sort of thinking about China and Africa, I'm talking about 15 years ago now. I think it's changed. I think that African countries have been able to negotiate better deals, better arrangements for themselves, which include sort of assuring knowledge transfer, ensuring certain level of capacity sort of development as part of the projects that are going on. So I don't think that it's easy to say right now that the news that we hear about China and Africa in Europe, I'm not so sure that that's up to date. And I think that's a problem.
It seems that trade and commerce became a leverage of political power. Have we entered an era of deglobalization?
I would say that we don't have entered an era of deglobalization. I think globalization is changing a lot. So we see quite a shift, actually. But we still have a lot of trade flows all over the globe. Global supply chains are still intact. Of course, they were interrupted during COVID. They were interrupted or are still interrupted by the trade wars still going on between the United States and China. But when you ask international businesses, they are pretty much dealing or having their business around the globe again and continue to do so. So I don't think so, but of course we have trade being used more as a political tool, but I think we already have used that for the last couple of decades as well, but on a different note, with a different perception. I mean, every trade agreement can be considered as a political tool. So it's more a positive idea of how we can use trade and global trade agreements, for instance, as a political tool. So it doesn't have to be this contrast. It's not necessarily the opposite, globalization and geoeconomics.
If decoupling is not the answer, how about diversification, friendshoring, regionalization, or even the term deglobalisation? Are these all answers to all the problems we have at the moment?
I think, first of all, we have to look what's behind these buzzwords. And they're like playing a lot with these buzzwords right now. So the question is, what actually does diversification mean? And I think it's a good idea to say that we should not be dependent on just one country, as we have seen that we were in Germany from Russia when it comes to energy. So I think that's not a good idea, but that was probably not a good idea even before we questioned the idea of being dependent from autocracies. So also from a very reasonable business point of view, or also from a societal approach, it makes sense to actually trade with all different kinds of partners. Also because of natural disasters and stuff like that can also happen. So I think diversification is a really good idea, but we really have to support businesses to do that. So I think it's a political idea. It's not the idea only businesses must have, but also political support has to come with it to make it happen, because it, of course, will cost a lot. So I think we have to be honest that there has to be some payments to be made to make that realize. Yeah.
But as a lesson we learned with dealing with Russia and maybe dealing with China, diversify only with countries who are friendly states?
Like friendshoring, you mean? Yeah, I'm quite hesitant to say that we should friendshore, because this means that we only trade with partners. Then it's really hard to define who actually is a friend, who actually is a democracy, who has the right to define who's a democracy, what's the measurement actually, and also the other question is, isn't that also then a containment of all the others? So we are still trying to somehow push them in a certain direction, and then the question is, wouldn't it be more reasonable to actually try to push them in a direction while also trading with them?